Well, thank you everyone for coming. Today the mining tax is finally gone, and it has been a long and sorry saga for Australia and the mining industry to have a mining tax that did so much reputational damage to Australia, and at the end of the day, combined with spending measures, left the budget significantly worse off. As a result of this initiative passing through the Parliament today, the budget overall will be around $50 billion better off over the next decade. In the short term, it will have a negative impact on the budget over the next 4 years of around $6.5 billion, but that will be recovered by delaying the increase in the superannuation guarantee to 12% as an offset in the overall cost over the medium term. Since the 2nd of May 2010, when the original version of the mining tax was announced, the mining tax has caused enormous uncertainty. It has been a dead hand on the mining industry, but most importantly, it's had significant reputational damage on Australia. As a result of getting rid of this today, together with the carbon tax, we are delivering in full on our promises. When we were elected just on 12 months ago, we promised the Australian people that we would set about strengthening the Australian economy and strengthening the Australian budget. That's exactly what we're doing. We inherited 93 announced but unlegislated taxation changes, and we have now dealt with most of those. We inherited a budget where there were major structural problems, and in fact the government failed to properly fund entities like the Reserve Bank and the ACCC. We set about fixing that. We said we were open for business. We've got on with the job of providing the appropriate approvals for foreign investment, but at the same time we've signed new free trade agreements with Japan and Korea. We have also said that we are going to end the age of entitlement, starting with big business, and we've done exactly that. They are hard decisions, they're not easy decisions, and we know that the budget has been tough, but this is the only way we are going to ensure prosperity and job creation into the future. Now, fundamentally, this is all part of our economic action strategy, which is about delivering jobs and delivering prosperity. Certainly, there is momentum in the economy, not as much as we would like, and that's why our infrastructure package announced in the budget is going to kick in over the next 2 years to help to deliver the jobs of the future. Now, the fundamental point is this. We came into government to govern, and that means dealing with the cards that we have. The cards, as they had fallen in the Senate, have delivered us some challenges, but we have worked our way carefully and methodically through those challenges. The Labor Party has been totally obstructionist at every point, every single point, and they have dealt themselves out of the debate. The Greens have dealt themselves out of the debate since the time that they agreed to our change to the debt limit. They've refused to be actively engaged in negotiations, and as a result, we negotiate with those that are prepared to discuss the matters. Now, in relation to the mining tax, this is exactly what we promised. We promised to get rid of it, and we've delivered. I pay great tribute to my colleague and friend, the Minister for Finance, who has helped to steer it through the Senate. I'd ask him to go through some of the initiatives and then we'll take questions.
Thank you very much, Joe. And today is indeed a great day for Australia. The mining tax was always a bad tax. It was a failed tax. It was a tax that was holding Australia back. The Senate today voted to help the government build a stronger, more prosperous economy and to repair the budget. The mining tax, of course, getting rid of the mining tax is indeed good news when it comes to attracting more investment and creating more jobs. Now, in the Senate today, we were able to get a repeal package through the Senate, which involved, of course, some adjustments to our original package. We went to the last election promising that we would get rid of the mining tax and that we would get rid of the unfunded promises that Labor recklessly and irresponsibly attached to it. The Senate voted against our proposals on 2 occasions. In the middle of July, the Senate voted to repeal the mining tax, but to retain three particular measures in place: the low-income support bonus, the low-income super contribution, and the school kids bonus. Since that time, the Treasurer and I have been working with crossbench senators in particular to achieve a consensus in order to help us get the best possible outcome, delivering the repeal of the mining tax and also delivering the best possible improvement to repair the budget in the circumstances. So what we've agreed to and what was passed by the Senate today, as you would by now be aware, involves retaining the school kids bonus on a means-tested basis until after the next election, involves retaining the low-income support bonus until after the election, and involves retaining the low-income super contribution until after the election. Now, this was not our plan A, this was not our preferred plan, but this was the best plan we could get. And finally, the savings, as has been indicated over the forward estimates, will be more than $10 billion, which is about $6.5 billion less than what we would have liked. But over the decade, the total savings, as the Treasurer has indicated, will actually be in the order of about $50 billion. And importantly, the additional cost over the forward estimates from the adjustments that we agreed to in the mining tax repeal package will be offset by the end of 2023 as a result of the adjustments that we also made to the increase in compulsory super. Now, I've seen a range of comments made by Bill Shorten as the Leader of the Opposition. What I would just point out again is what Bill Shorten said as Minister for Financial Services and Superannuation in government, and that is that increases in compulsory super come out of people's wages. That's not my quote, that is literally Bill Shorten's quote. Now, by us making the adjustment that went through the Senate today, we allow people to keep more of their own money pre-retirement for people to decide themselves whether they want to use it to pay off their mortgage faster, whether they want to save it through superannuation on a tax-effective basis. So some of the hysteria that has been coming from the Labor Party is quite dishonest and hypocritical, given that it was Labor in the first place that did everything they could to stop us from implementing our election commitments, and given what Labor has said in the past in relation to these matters.
Given you've had to make a compromise and accept a short-term loss in revenue, the $6.5 billion, is it fair to say now that your short-term return to surplus is going to be put back by a little while, but you're still on track to get that strong surplus?
I'm not going to speculate on the surplus, Phil.
Forward estimates had you getting back
yeah,
to
I know.
neutral.
It does have an impact, negative impact on the forward estimates. We're dealing with that.
And the important point here is updates are made on a usual basis. The next update will be in the mid-year economic and fiscal outlook. And in the meantime, what the government is doing, we're doing what we've said we would do all along, and that is implement our budget measures in an orderly and methodical way, one by one, including through the Senate, as we've again evidenced today.
Given what you're saying about increases in superannuation coming out of people's wages, do you still think that increasing the superannuation guarantee to 12% is a worthy aim? And just a secondary part of that question, the Financial Services Council is saying that delaying it by 7 years will cost, I think they say, $128 billion. Does that not mean more people will be reliant on the pension, and isn't that the opposite of what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah. This is not our preferred option, but it's the only option that has been on the table. And if people think that this is going to have a long-term impact on their superannuation, blame Labor. They wouldn't let us keep our election commitments. This is entirely their fault. I mean, they're the ones that have the numbers to immediately pass the legislation. Understand this, Clive Palmer is only relevant because Labor and the Greens keep voting with him. He can't have any influence unless he gets the votes of Labor and the Greens. And the fact that the Labor Party and the Greens keep voting with Mr Palmer makes them irrelevant, and it means that we have to deal with those people, not just Mr Palmer, but also a number of other independents to get things through. Now, it's always been a work in progress. We said that we would work carefully and methodically and engage with everyone, which I've been doing, Mathias has been doing. We've been working it through, ignoring all the speculation, dealing with the facts, and this is part of the delivery. But there's more work to be done.
Now, in relation to the specific question that you asked on the 12%, well, clearly we still support it because the government amendments today, of course, which were passed by the Senate, will still provide for the increase of compulsory super to 12%, except that it will now happen by 1 July 2025.
But Treasurer, you didn't promise at the last election that you would delay the ESG increase in this way. So why didn't you hold your nerve, stick to your election commitment on the super guarantee increase, rather than make this compromise?
Well,
which
we would
breaks
never,
the election compromise?
we would never have got it through. It's as simple as that.
The alternative was not to get $50 billion in savings over the next decade. The alternative was not to have $10 billion of savings over the forward estimates. The alternative was for the mining tax to continue to remain in place and hold Australia back when it comes to generating stronger growth to create more jobs. So we went for the best possible deal that we could achieve in the national interest.
So the Party United Party's basically put this beyond the next election. Do you think that any of these measures, and you've sort of answered the question on super, have merit in themselves, so that if the fiscal situation allowed it, you might actually consider putting them back to voters in 2016?
Well, the starting point is if Labor is going to reintroduce the mining tax, which is what they say is part of their $21 billion of savings, by the way. They actually say that they're going to reintroduce the mining tax and the carbon tax. They're claiming the mining tax will raise $3.3 billion over the next 4 years as part of their $21 billion. I don't know how they got that figure, but it's divorced from reality. But they're saying they're going to reintroduce that as part of their $21 billion of savings, and they're going to reintroduce all the spending measures. Well, that's a magic pudding, like I've never seen. Now, the fundamental point is, we'll tell you what we're promising at the next election as we get closer to the next election. We haven't made the 12-month mark yet, but we promised we'd do what we've done. That's being delivered in full. And, it doesn't always turn out the way that you might necessarily want, but we can only deal with what we have, and I think this was a damn good deal for the Australian people.
Today, your colleagues say that you told them this morning that WA was the least reformist government in the country. What do you want the Barnett government to do to meet your high expectations?
Well, I must say I'm glad that the Barnett government is undertaking a number of reforms, including selling a number of assets, and therefore they will have access to the asset recycling pool, which is a huge opportunity for them to reinvest in new infrastructure. I understand where Western Australia is coming from in relation to the GST. I certainly do. And that is something that is going to be very actively considered as part of the Federation and Tax White Papers.
On the GST, I understand that the Prime Minister also said today to the party room that if there is going to be a solution to this, then the money should not come from the smaller states, but from the larger states, so Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland. Is that your preferred solution to this problem? Look, and I'd like to put that also to dear Mathias.
Well, he was negotiating at the time, so I'm going to leave him. Well, you can add whatever you want, Mathias. As a West Australian, I wouldn't stand in the way. But the bottom line is we're here to govern for the whole nation. That's what we're focused on. And you can understand individual members and senators advocating for their state or their district or their community. That's appropriate as it is. We've got a duty to act on behalf of the whole country.
And I might just add here, Colin Barnett is an outstanding Premier for the great state of Western Australia, and I work with him very closely. It's very appropriate for the Premier of Western Australia to advocate strongly as the leader of the government in Western Australia on behalf of Western Australia, the way he does. Obviously, for those of us with national responsibilities, we do need to ensure that whatever policy solutions we develop over time in relation to this and other matters are fair and sustainable on a national basis.
Do you like your Prime Minister's model?
Come on, two more quickly.
Okay.
Yep.
On the $6.5 billion short-term hit again, will you try and make further savings measures to make up for that, or will you eat that over?
We'll see how we go. We'll see how the bottom
But
line
the
is.
important point, this is budget neutral between now and 2023.
But Mr. Hockey, you previously said in recent speeches and comments and what have you that you would look to make further savings.
Yeah, we're always looking to make savings, yeah. And Michelle, final question.
On pushing the superannuation out now twice, haven't you put it so far out in the distance that it's really meaningless? You can't you can't make any sort of commitment that far out.
Well, anybody who's concerned about that, blame Bill Shorten. Because if Bill Shorten had respected the mandate that we received at the last election, we wouldn't be standing here today. The mining tax would have been repealed, and the compulsory super increases would have been in place consistent with what we said we would do before the last election. The only reason there is a further delay is because that is the only way that we could get legislation which is in the national interest through the Australian Parliament.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks.